Thank you, and welcome again to the final panel of this rich weekend. And pop quiz. Yesterday during the puppet show, the wise monk, what was the one-word final advice he gave to the blue one? Do you remember that final one-word advice that the old wise monk gave? Yes, that was before Amitofo was practice. So it's always good to end on the note of practice, because that's what we come here to reinvigorate our vows, our intention for, to go back and continue the practice. I'm so excited for our panel because we have a lineup of unusual suspects. We have, starting from the youngest, I think Brigia must be the youngest speaker of the whole weekend, 28, and coming from South Carolina, from a devout Southern Baptist family, after Ivy League education, is now in her spare time writing sci-fi script for Hollywood, but most of her work is working with millennials, young people, transforming grief and deepening into their practice. And she is also a certified doula and end-of-life care chaplain. So from life to death, through sorrow and joy, she's got it all covered. And Jin Wei Shi grew up in Poland and has been ordained since 4 years ago fully as a bhikkhu in the Mahayana lineage, as wearing Tang Dynasty robes, and was recently back in his homeland in Warsaw, where he became the talk of the town, or where all the tourists look, is not to the tourist attraction, but at the tall monk, Caucasian monk wearing Tang Dynasty robe. And Anipema Deki, if you haven't already met her in the square, might have heard of her story or read her book Set Free. And she used to be a high-flying investment banker and a British mom, now for the past 7 years a devoted Tibetan Buddhist practitioner and the only Western woman to be ordained in Bhutan. So even for Berkeley, I think this is an unusual makeup. So very excited for the conversation of how they have come to the practice and chosen to give their life to this path. So we'll start by inviting Anipema Deki to share some words.
Thank you. Yeah, we were told to share some points about developing or deepening your own personal practice, and that's what I'm going to speak on for a few minutes. Firstly, just to remind you that there are 3 baskets of teachings in Buddhism. There is the first basket with its ethical values and conduct. The second basket, Samten, is the concentration basket, which probably is where this mindfulness sits. And then there's the third basket of teachings, which is the wisdom basket. So for anyone thinking how to deepen their practice beyond mindfulness, I think if you look to one side, you'll see ethics, and if you look to the other side, you'll see wisdom. And both of them are worth exploring and then integrating, connecting the ethics, the concentration, and the wisdom. So I encourage you to do that. Often people's beginning place is quite harsh. People's beginning place is like, they talk of the distracted mind, or I think somebody said the monkey mind. To choose to start there is already a choice. I think in many of the texts that I study, we begin with the Buddha nature. We begin with recognizing all sentient beings have Buddha nature. And I just wonder if that's also worth exploring for yourself if you imagine that you have Buddha nature, I wonder how that would feel for you to know that. And I wonder what that would change in your beginning. And starting from that place, then we do a lot of reflection on the preciousness of being born in a human form, which is maybe not something you've looked into in depth. The teachings on this are very profound, like wave upon wave of incredible opportunity given by this human birth. Again, I don't know if you feel as if somehow being born as a human is a precious thing. And I encourage you to maybe look at that and see again how, if you feel your preciousness, you know this opportunity, how that would change things for you in your practice. And then thirdly, there's intention and there's integrity. And they go hand in hand. As a Vajrayana practitioner, our intention is to reach enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. Sitting with that intention and keeping to it in every moment of our day, it's quite a big job. So I would encourage you, if you're looking to deepen your practice, to spend time truly in the depth of your heart, thinking about your intention. And once you know it clearly, then remaining with it, never going far from it, every moment. And now from a practice point of view, sometimes when you see practitioners, they look very separate. They look like they're on their own, doing something. But in our practice, this wish to help all sentient beings is something that we visualize as we practice. So though from the outside you may look like you're on your own, in your mind you're carrying all of limitless beings with you. Like waves and waves of limitless beings, pandas and dogs and fish and birds and humans, limitless beings. So in your mind it's like that. Even though you look like you're one being on your own, doing something for yourself, for the mind of the Vajrayana practitioner, it's never like that. And that's all I had to say.
Thank you. And Jin Wei Shi recently, just 2 days ago, came back from a big trip to Europe, including to his hometown in Poland, reuniting with family. There's a lot of fresh thoughts connected with practice and the merits of the practice. So would you share some?
Hello everyone. Yes, like Tsilong mentioned, I just yesterday actually I came from the trip from Europe, stuck somewhere in LA for one night, so it was a very good practice of uncertainty. And finally I came here, just arrived for a lunch in the right time, so I'm very happy to be with you, especially in the panel of practice. And what I want to share, how somehow I view the Buddha's teaching, the Dharma Vinaya, or the like Venerable mentioned about 3 baskets. So for me, the Buddha was a healer. He was a kind of very skillful doctor who came because he really deeply see our condition, where we are. He knows that we suffer. He knows that we stuck with different problems, that we need some help. And he taught many different methods of practice, and it's wonderful that we can explore so many different tools what he gave us, like meditation, recitation, visualization, the chanting practice, and bowing. Today we have wonderful experience to did the 3 steps 1 bow practice around the tower. It was very touching, very transformative way to kind of reconnect in our body and mind and heart. And what I want to share, one of the biggest discovery from my personal journey, be someone who tried to follow this Buddhist feats, was the practice of forgiveness. I just recently, actually, when we were in London, I heard in one of Awakened Circles the wonderful quote from Mahatma Gandhi about forgiveness, that he says he already known that his life probably will end, that someone probably is possible to can kill him. And he said to his Muslim friends, please pray for me because I want to have a power to forgive for the man who will shoot me. And it was for me very deep guidance, and remind me something what I did in my personal practice. What was, of course, the Mahatma Gandhi saw that the bar is very high, but for me, I noticed the most difficult to forgive is someone who is the closest to me. First is myself, and the second, in my case, there's parents, especially my father. And all my practice, from my start, my journey, I dedicated to him. I practiced the bowing practice every day, and it took me 15 years to kind of came to the place that we can have opportunity to meet each other in very deep place. And as you know, Zilong mentioned I was born in Poland. So in Poland, the chance that you are not Catholic is 2%. So, of course, my father was a little bit worried what's happened to his son. He's so obsessed with some strange religion that you bow to, you do different strange things, and he was worried what's happening with me. And I really deeply understand his worries. And of course, we have a different issues when the practice of bowing helps me work through. And so I started from few bows and end up in 1,500 every day. I think it was millions of them after a while, but I think the number are not important. The most important for me, the place when I can, through the bowing, access the place in the heart that can really deeply see my real image and kind of observe that how many things I've done in the past was unskillful, how often I saw myself at the center of universe. And the bowing, any moment, kind of reminds me and open up my consciousness to kind of the deep understanding of this. So it was, I can say, kind of recycling practice with intention that I can observe and then see, I can let go them. Observe, see, let go. Bow by bow. And the verse, what I what I recite in myself when I'm doing this bowing practice was the verse from Avatamsaka Sutra, with this kind of manual of the Bodhisattva practice. And the verse goes like, for all the harmful things I've done, from the body, speech, and mind, from beginningless greed, anger, and stupidity, from lifetimes without number, through this very day, I repented and I vow to change entirely.
I think to bow day in and day out, up to 1,500 bows for 15 years, is the attention span that our generation might not have. As Nipun earlier said, we're down from 12 to 8 seconds of attention span. So maybe from the millennials' perspective, in Brigia work with a lot of young people, and one way is through the Death Trap Academy that she runs to help young people. Could you speak from the perspective of millennial and still early compared to the monastic, we're still early on our path. What does deepening practice mean to you?
This is working. Thank you for that question. For me, deepening the practice takes place within the context of relationships, which is a theme that I'm hearing from the two previous speakers. Even what brought me to the practice, having been introduced to Buddhism through a relationship, and having that practice cultivated through relationships with teachers. And when I reflect on the precepts or the Eightfold Path, the things that we as Buddhists aspire to practice, they're about relationships with ourselves and relationships with others. And that is primarily what I try to teach, to millennials and just through my being. So when I think about my practice in Zazen, when I'm sitting with myself, I'm not just sitting with myself to escape. I'm not sitting with myself to become closed off. I'm sitting with myself to look at and to attend to my relationship with myself so that I can responsibly attend to my relationship with others. And I bring that practice to my relationship with others, whether it's practicing right speech, looking at my anger, practicing no harm, beneficial action, looking at what that means when I do feel wronged or when I am upset, and just having that awareness and that willingness to keep returning to myself and keep returning to that relationship. Zilong previously mentioned that I worked as a doula for some time, as a birth doula. And currently, during the day, I work as a hospice and palliative care chaplain, as well as a bereavement coordinator. And at night, I do teach workshops and I write. And, when I tell people all the things that I quote unquote do, right, they look at these things and they say they seem so different or separate. But what I see is a connection and a desire to have relationships and to practice healing and being within relationships with other people, cultivating healthiness and healing through my own being, and creating space for others, like whether I'm a chaplain by name because I'm wearing a badge that says chaplain, or whether no one recognizes me as a chaplain, I'm just moving through the world and they're interacting with me on a one-on-one basis, or in a small group, creating space such that people can see themselves and recognize their own agency and feel respected, and building those relationships so that healing can move forward. I grew up Southern Baptist, and Buddhism is about the farthest thing you can get from being Southern Baptist. And when I look at my practice in relationship to my roots and my upbringing, what I would use to describe my personal practice as a socially engaged Buddhist is what I'll say, is the call. That's something that we frequently used in Baptist Christianity. And the call is it's like a whisper or a nudging, something pointing you in the direction to do something with your life. Usually it's a call to ministry, and usually it's a call to a certain type of ministry, to be a reverend most frequently, or maybe a chaplain. And if I think of an example in the Judeo-Christian context, I think it was, I forget who it was, someone had a fever and he heard the voice of God or what have you calling him to action for 3 days before he decided to get up and move. And as a Buddhist, I also heard that call. Like, what did I feel the people around me needed? What did the communities I was serving needed? What did they need from me? Who did I need to become? And who do I need to be on my day-to-day in order to serve those needs? And that's how I found the practice of Zazen. And that is how I decided to, I guess, answer the call and take on the lay ordination robes and become a Buddhist chaplain, because I saw a need and I had a desire in myself to serve that need. But I understood that I first and foremost needed to be responsible to myself, and I needed a practice that supported that. And so I looked to the precepts, and so I looked to the path, the Eightfold Path, and so I looked to teachers who have come before me and who still walk the earth now, who can show me through their being and their practice ways that I can be in relationship with others and in relationship to myself to embody a being that facilitates healing in the Bodhisattva way. So, yeah. Thank you.
And throughout this weekend, in the earlier panels and on the lunch tables, there are many discussions about the difference between the true cultivation and also the outer forms. And I think all three of you are uniquely positioned because you have taken on a path that's not your cultural upbringing. How do you get to the core of the practice, both empowered by the cultural heritage and not being bothered by it? What makes it true cultivation instead of just going through the motion? What lies at the heart of the practice? If anyone would like to share.
Can you repeat the question just shortly, like in a short way?
Mm-hmm. What is the inner process that makes it a practice instead of just a ritual? What happens inside that makes something a spiritual practice? That makes it the sufficient condition for it to become a spiritual practice?
It's something unbreakable. And that unbreakableness is based on devotion to a teacher and understanding of suffering and the need for compassion. And both of those things are unbreakable.
So for me, it's interesting to mention about the fact that we came from different traditions. And I mentioned about in the Poland that you're very influenced by Catholic Church and by Christian beliefs. So for me, it was very interesting to do one exercise for myself to see where I am conditioned, where these conditions came from. And the biggest obstacle, I can say, in my practice was the sense that I'm broken, the sense that I'm split somewhere, the sense that is some alienation, the sense of that I am need someone else to fix it because I'm lacking in the very deep sense. And it was very deeply, kind of unconsciously, I can say, rooted, sometimes manifest as a guilt, for instance, or to have a higher expectations to myself, or whatever, I should be done in a particular way. And, it's of course big topic, But big shifts in my consciousness happen when already I understood this is the story. There are different stories. And the story when Buddha gave us is the fact that we are complete, we're lacking nothing, and the beginning we are pure. And the practice of the cultivation, whatever practice we do, is uncovering all these obstacles and kind of block the access to who we are. And who we are complete, lacking nothing, and this is our natural state of compassion, joy, and giving, and equanimity. This is who we are. So this could be my answer.
Thank you. And also, another thread that I see in all of your stories and in a conversation last night is about faith. Faith in on the practice, such an important factor and also the most difficult to come by, especially in a context when critical thinking gets such a high premium and we have so many options to try things out. So would love to hear, where do you find faith? How does faith grow in you that establish practice as a priority in your life? It doesn't have to be faith in a particular religion, but just to walk on this path unwaveringly.
That is an excellent question. For me, faith has never been an option. So and in thinking through the question, I think about the difference between faith and hope, and I really had to separate those things for myself, because within the language of hope, there's a undercurrent of expectation. For me, faith is just a willingness to invest in a process regardless of the outcome. And that is what I feel I must do every day.
Okay, I got something now. Yeah? In a lot of my training, I mean, different forms of faith, but from my training, the faith is in that you understand the link between harming or non-virtuous activity and the creation of suffering, and harming activity in the creation of suffering, non-harming activity in the creation of happiness. That's fundamental to a Buddhist view, in my training anyway. And that's the faith. You have to have faith in that relationship, according to many of the texts we study. So I know you think, and we can apply the word faith to many things, obviously faith in the Buddha and faith in the Sangha, but it's very important to have the right view, the faith that harming leads to suffering and non-harming leads to happiness.
Yeah, the faith is a very interesting word. I usually don't use the faith because there's so many baggage on it. I like the words confidence or trust, for instance. And because I think this is coming from this place, and especially in the Buddha's teaching. And we are saying that the faith or confidence has a kind of three elements. The one is the truly belief in myself. That's as someone who is capable to do this work, is capable to kind of transform deeply myself. The second, I can say, this is kind of confidence in the teaching, on these recipes of the Buddha who gave us, or teachers, or the wise ones. And the next one is the kind of confidence in the Buddha himself, as an awakened teacher who gave us these formulas. And what for me, the confidence not coming, it's interesting how it's happening, but it's coming from this kind of deep investigating of the teaching. And I very like this word, the chanda, in the Pali term, what is kind of wholesome desire. And usually how our heart responds it's kind of give rise this, yes, it's wonderful, I want to do it, I want to try it out. So it's kind of natural inner calling, I can say, to go for it. And it naturally appears as a kind of wholesome emotion to try out. And when I test out this teaching, I can see the results. In the moment of let go, when I can check my kind of biochemical inner being, my body and mind feels it helps. This is something what heals. And any moment of let go, my confidence or trust increased slowly. So I think I can say that for me, the trust or confidence, this is kind of step-by-step process. But I'm still kind of, I make a hypothesis. I do, it's very scientific in some sense. I check how it works, and I kind of see how it affects me, and make next step. So this is kind of very lively, organic feeling, confidence or faith.
Going back to Anipimadeki, I know you have a 13-year-old son, and at the same time you also help the children in Bhutan, special needs children. So wondering, and you have become a nun after your biological son was born. How has your love for children changed, evolved, or expanded since you started to practice, now that you have so many children, your own son and these kids in Bhutan?
Yeah, in fact, I spotted a couple of people asleep in the audience, and you feel that feeling of the mother that, they're asleep now, they're peaceful, I just spotted you, but I'm not going to look at you, okay? I'm just going to look at the ceiling now. We all, through many lifetimes, have had the experience of being a mother and being a child, many limitless lifetimes. Yeah, so that's an understanding we can all call on through our practice. I think that, obviously I'm celibate now, right? So I'm living under vows. But I'm very grateful that I had a child before I was instructed to become a nun, because I believe that placing this some other being's life so completely in front of your own, without question, they're pushing you beyond anything you thought you could do, like survive without sleep, and they throw up on you, and they cry, and you can't stop it, and pretty much all of the parameters of patience and generosity and enthusiastic diligence, all of these practices you can learn very quickly as a parent. And they're not theoretical, they're visceral. They're at 4 a.m, And so I feel, whilst we've all been mothers many, many lifetimes, I really honor that, because I think it is, in many ways, a deep spiritual path in its own right. I just thought I'd say that. I'd forgotten what your question was. So that's what I'm going to say.
Thank you. And also for Brigia, you are kind of representing our generation, under 30, and in your journey of practice, learning from your teachers, some of whom are also here, do you think there are ways that our generation just practice differently, or we work differently, that the teaching needs to either should be evolved, or we just should know how we grew up, we tend to practice? Any patterns you see in the young people that you work with?
That's an interesting question. I'm not sure in terms of how we practice differently. I do work with American millennials in my spare time, and and being a millennial myself, that is a very interesting and at times tough age group to work in because of the type of grief we've experienced in terms of the boom of technology, what the expectations were for previous generations versus our reality, how we're coping with that, with our connection through technology. So I think that frequently what I see in working with millennials is that what we not just what we expect from life, but what we might expect from the practice is quite different from the reality. And given that we can frequently expect instant or concrete results, it can be quite frustrating. And working with folks such that they invest in themselves and commit to the practice outside of regardless of their expectations, has been difficult. But I guess all in all, I don't feel that I can say that millennials in general face a particular hardship compared to previous generations. Like, I think that this is just a reality of where we are and who we are, and the next generation will have their own thing. You know, previous generations had their thing, and we make it work with the practice, however it works.
And on our walking up the stage, Anipema saw on this little notebook something that I wrote as a reminder for me to come back to practice. And I know in our journeys, there's always the dark night of the soul, where there are times that we just don't want to do that sit in the evening. Are there almost like personal mantras or that post-it note you have on your wall that helps to bring you back in that dark night of the soul, that keeps you come back to the practice? That's your personal mantra to power through and see the light. Or maybe I can just read what's on the cover of my notebook. On the front it says 降伏其心，善用其心, meaning to tame and train the mind and to use the heart and mind skillfully. That's kind of what the core of what real practice means for me at this stage. So on my little notebook, I write it down as a reminder every time I see a check. Am I doing that work? Am I working on the heart and mind? So for you, is there that kind of anchor or a little hack or a little trick that helps you to remind you what is real practice?
Yeah, I require all my students to learn the 4 immeasurables off by heart in order that they can pull them out in emergency situations. And then there's one quote, which is the Bodhisattva never lets the loving kindness for all beings leave their mind for 1 second. That's a helpful one for me also, yeah.
For me, it's simple. Everything is okay, whatever come out, and have the reminder to have this. It's nothing going on really. And what's really helped me is practice of loving kindness. This is loving kindness, metta practice, but metta practice in very kind of, I can say, somehow emotional level. Then I can connect my heart with this practice and feel it deeply in my whole body and hold that. So in this field, whatever I interact is the sense of generosity, connection, and well-being, and joy, and everything is okay. Is the sense.
I really appreciate this question, and the line about the dark night of the soul, which I could really empathize with. For me, Zazen in practice has never brought me happiness, but it's brought me groundedness, and there's been a distinct difference. And, you know, unfortunately, my mind and emotions and just being in general never let me go too long without practice. It's something I have to, continue to return to one way or another. If I slip, if I get too busy, like I have to bring myself back to it in order to feel grounded, in order to be the person that I feel that I'm called to be, in order to do the work and the things that I do. But it's very frequently, it can be unsettling and bring up all kinds of things, especially if I'm paying attention, especially if I'm looking at the suffering of others and attentive to my own suffering. I don't always feel great after I get up from sitting zazen. But I do feel grounded and equipped to stand firm in that reality and to venture in that reality with other people. And there are times when I do experience a dark night of the soul. Just had one recently. And for that, I am very thankful for teachers and community, which is why I personally don't treat my personal practice as a solitary pursuit. It is something I have to do within community of others, even if I don't get to make it to a sitting that week, being able to reach out to teachers, being able to read koans, or to have access to books of teachers who I can turn to, who have undoubtedly experienced similar things. That's been very helpful.
And I think that's the community is a great note to remind, although our panel topic is how to deepen our personal practice, but this is just as much communal, be it in intimate relationship or relationship with a teacher or with our family. It's very much, the personal practice is about community. And as we have practiced for these past 2 days in community, hope we have all gathered that reinvigoration so that we go back on Monday with more faith in our path. So thanks to our panelists, and thank you all.